Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're looking at some pretty cool temple news from the April 2021 General Conference.
Ooh, yes, this is a good one.
We'll be focusing on President Nelson's talk, the one, COVID-19 and temples. I think a lot of us are probably wondering when we can get back to the temple.
For sure. It's been a minute for some of us.
And we'll get to that, I promise.
Yeah.
But there's also some big news about brand new temples coming. Lots of construction.
Yeah, a real construction boom and even a new approach to where these temples are going to be.
Okay, so first up, let's tackle how COVID-19 changed things in the temples. Remember those initial closures?
Oh, yeah, tough times.
It was a bummer for sure. But the church decided to reopen gradually in phases.
Smart move.
President Nelson actually outlined these 4 phases, kind of like slowly increasing capacity and making sure everyone's safe.
Right, yeah. It was all about prioritizing. I mean, think about it. In those early phases, they had to focus on the most vital ceremonies, like sealings for endowed couples.
Makes sense. So phase 1, sealings for endowed couples. Phase 2, that's when they opened it up to everyone for those living ordinances, including endowments.
Oh, and for anyone listening who might not be familiar with endowments, those are those super special ceremonies where we make covenants with God.
Exactly. Okay, then we move on to phase 3, and that's when proxy work for our ancestors came back.
You know, doing those ordinances for those who've already passed on.
Right. And then finally, we hit phase 4, back to full temple operations the way it was before.
The big question now is, when is your temple going to reach that glorious phase 4?
I was just going to ask that.
Well, President Nelson was pretty clear that it all depends on the COVID situation in each area.
Local COVID conditions, yeah.
So basically, the quicker we can get those case numbers down in our communities, the faster our temples can open back up completely. Kind of emphasizes how we all have a part to play in this, doesn't it?
Big time. But even while we're waiting, we can still do things, right? Like President Nelson encouraged everyone to focus on their temple covenants and the blessings that come with them. It's not like our connection to the temple just disappears because the doors are closed for a bit.
Yeah, it's about holding on to that spiritual connection, that yearning for temple worship. Really shows how important temples are to us.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about all this new temple construction. Remember all those groundbreaking ceremonies last year? I think there were 21. Right in the middle of a pandemic, too.
It was crazy. And right now, there are 41 temples either being built or renovated. That's a pretty big commitment to making temples more accessible.
For sure. And, President Nelson has talked a lot about wanting to bring temples closer to members so we can attend more frequently.
Yeah, it's a pretty big shift in thinking.
He actually announced 20, that's right, 20 new temple locations. We won't list them all here, but you can find them in his talk. But I got to mention a few that really stood out to me. Oslo, Norway.
Wow, that's amazing.
Brussels, Belgium, Vienna, Austria, Kumasi,
Ghana.
Beira,
Wow.
Mozambique, Cape Town, South Africa, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
All over the world.
Shows how much the church is growing globally, right? And all those different locations, it really shows that the temple message is universal. It's for everyone.
Absolutely. It's about creating sacred spaces where everyone can feel connected to something bigger than themselves, no matter where they are in the world. And speaking of that, let's talk about why temples are so important.
Yeah, it's more than just buildings and locations, right?
Right. I mean, President Nelson didn't just talk about statistics and new buildings. He talked about how temples are absolutely crucial to restoration of the gospel.
That's right. He said something like, temple ordinances give our lives this unique power and strength that you can't find anywhere else.
It's a pretty powerful statement.
Oh.
What do you think it means? Why is temple work so important to you?
That's a big question. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of new temples and reopenings, but it's really about so much more than just the physical buildings, you know?
I get what you mean.
It's those covenants we make, the connections we forge, the spiritual strength we find in those sacred spaces. That's a real heart of it.
And that's something we can hold on to no matter what phase our local temple might be in.
Absolutely. That's the key takeaway here.
It's all about maintaining that connection.
Exactly. It really is a reminder that the temple experience goes beyond the physical building.
Yeah, it's something we carry with us.
For sure.
Thinking about the future of temples, both in our own communities and around the world, it feels like President Nelson is offering this mix of like practical steps and hope,
I see that.
We've got these concrete plans for reopening this huge global expansion and this really powerful call to focus on those eternal temple covenants.
It's a message that speaks to us on a lot of different levels, right? Like it's about where we are now, what we hope for in the future, and those core beliefs we share as Latter-day Saints.
Exactly. And, President Nelson left us with this really interesting question. He talked about the pioneers who sacrificed so much to make all this temple history possible.
Right.
And then he asked, who are the pioneers in your life who've helped you connect with the temple? It's such a powerful question, so personal.
Yeah, it makes you think about all the people who've shaped your own journey to the temple.
Hmm.
The mentors, family, friends, anyone who helped you understand just how sacred temple worship really is.
Yeah.
Like for me, it was my mom. She was the one who really made me love the temple.
Mm,
She would tell me stories about her own experiences there, and she just instilled this deep reverence in me for those sacred spaces.
I love that. It's amazing how those personal connections can have such a lasting impact on us. And it goes even further than remembering those people.
How so?
While President Nelson also asked, what kind of legacy are you building through your own temple service? That one really got me thinking.
Oh, yeah, for
It's
sure.
like we're all a part of this story, this tapestry of faith and sacrifice.
I like that. A tapestry.
And each of us has a chance to add something meaningful to it.
To leave our own mark on history.
Right. It's a call to action, don't you think? To really consider how what we're doing today is going to shape the future of temple worship for those who come after us.
It is. It's a big responsibility.
It kind of reminds me of something we talked about earlier, about how individual effort can lead to collective progress.
Yeah.
Like, just as working to lower COVID numbers can help temples reopen sooner, our own dedication to temple service can make the whole church stronger.
And bless so many lives, both now and in the future.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into President Nelson's talk today,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to think about that ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of impact do you want to make? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Those are some good questions to ponder as we continue on our own temple journeys.
Big questions, but good ones. And, you don't need to have all the answers figured out right now.
Sure.
It's the journey that matters, the effort to become closer to God and more like the Savior in those sacred spaces.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The journey is what matters most. And the temple is there to guide us along the way. It really is. It makes you think, what kind of impact do I want to have? What kind of legacy do I want to leave?
Those are the questions, aren't they?
And as we wrap up our deep dive today into President Nelson's message, I think it's important to consider those questions.
Absolutely. To really let them sink in.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the practical stuff about temples reopening to those more, spiritual aspects of temple covenants.
It's been quite a journey.
And I hope everyone listening has maybe learned something new or felt, a little more connected to their own temple journey.
I think you've done a great job of that, by the way, connecting everything back to personal experience, making it relatable.
Thanks. Yeah, the temple is such a personal thing, right?
Totally. Everyone's journey is different.
Well, we've reached the end of our time together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into all things temples.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
Until next time, may your hearts be full of that temple spirit, and may your lives be blessed by the peace and power that comes from serving and worshiping in those holy places.